Hello everyone, good afternoon if you're joining us in Europe, and good morning to those of you joining us from the US and Canada. Today we're excited to have three excellent guests with us on our webinar to discuss the topic of women in tech, creating a more diverse workforce and gender equal industry. I've got Tamara McCleary, Rachel Miller and Theodora Lau joining us. And I'm just going to ask the three guests to introduce themselves, and whilst they do that, I also want to ask them what did they want to be when they were a kid? What kind of career were they expecting to go into when they were younger? So Tamara, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name's Tamara McCleary, and I'm the CEO of Thulium. Thulium is a social media strategy and messaging company, and we focus on organic and earned social media. So it's exciting, and it's not at all what I thought I would be when I grew up, because we didn't have social media back then. What is it, 45% of all the jobs in 2030 haven't been invented yet. So I think a lot of us maybe are working in things currently that we never imagined, and our kids will certainly be working in jobs that they never imagined. But growing up, I wanted to be one of two things. Either I wanted to run an orphanage, or I wanted to be a witch.
Wow. Wasn't
Sorry,
expecting
that's the truth. That's all you get from me. 100% truth right here. I wanted to be like, do you guys remember Bewitched, that show? I mean, she wiggled her nose and her house was clean, and she was ready for the day, and I hated cleaning my room, so that's how cool. I love to be a witch and wiggle my nose, and everything's just done. But alas, I haven't figured out the technology for that yet. I love that.
Isn't that IoT? Does an Alexa do that now?
Well, Alexa's not cleaning my house yet, so. Yeah, or packing lunches for kids, or meal planning. Dang it.
Okay, great, thank you. And Rachel, over to you.
Sure. Hey, everyone. My name is Rachel Miller. I am Influencer Marketing Manager at Top Rank Marketing, which is an integrated digital marketing agency, and we specialize primarily in B2B tech. Growing up, probably from around maybe 10 to 14 years old, I wanted to be an architect, which really surprised my parents because we didn't know any architects. They didn't know quite where that came from, but they did their due diligence, and they actually found some local architects, and they introduced me to them. And then somewhere along the way through my teenage years, I think it was the timing, kind of like the late 90s, early 2000s, web design was becoming more prevalent, so my interest in architecture kind of morphed into web design, and I went to art school, and here we are.
Wow. So there is some link.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, cool.
It's not a straight path, but it got me here.
That's great, thanks. Theo, over to you.
All right. Well, mine wasn't a straight path here. So I'm Theo, and I'm in the innovation space, mainly looking at how can we leverage technology to improve a consumer's financial well-being and health as well. But I'm mostly interested in what we can do for the older demographics. So growing up, I alternated between wanting to be a doctor, a lawyer, and finally settled on, or what I thought I was going to be a geologist, until in my senior year, and I got told, you can never, ever be an engineer. Well, so
Wow.
Guess what I did? I went to an engineering school, and I did my chemical engineering degree. Just to prove that I could do it. And voila, here I am.
Hey, good for you. And so I suppose I should introduce myself as well. So yeah, my name's Alistair Wheat. I head the product strategy here at Analytica. We're an influencer marketing platform, help brands to find influencers online and work out who to engage with. And when I was a kid, I actually also wanted to be an architect, but mainly because I thought that meant I could spend all day playing with Lego. But I did sort of carry that on a little bit, and then I realized you had to study for 7 years to be an architect, so that kind of put me off, and ended up doing economics instead, which I suppose has some kind of link to analysis, which is really kind of the line of business that I'm in now. And yeah, so I just wanted to ask that. I'll explain a bit why I asked those those questions. There is a link to the topic of the talk. But just for those listening, if you do have questions as we're going through, you can ask questions through the Bright Talk panel. We're also following the conversation online, so feel free to just tweet us at Analytica as well. And also, if you aren't following Tamara, Rachel, or Theo online, the Twitter profiles are on the screen, so definitely follow them, and they also do some great stuff on LinkedIn and other places like Facebook and Instagram as well. So definitely check them out. We're talking specifically about the social dimension to this discussion a bit later on. But the reason I asked that question is because we all know that there's a lack of women in tech generally, and we've heard, especially in the last year, problems with brands. I mean, this time last year, I think we're about to go into the whole thing around Uber and some of the problems they had with their engineers, female engineers being mistreated. And there's been stories coming out about various brands over the last couple of years having a very sort of bro culture and not being a very friendly place. So I was wondering, how much do the three of you think the current problems of the lack of women in tech is to do with the actual culture in the companies, or is it something that goes much further back and it's actually kind of deeply rooted in the education system, like what Theo was just saying, that you wanted to go into engineering, but people were telling you couldn't be an engineer? Is this something that is even fixable by businesses, or is it something that really governments need to be addressing, even going through the education system? So happy for anyone to kick off the answer to that one.
I'm sorry. Oh, go Theo.
Oh, no, sorry. No, go first.
Sure. So I'll jump in. I think, it's obviously an issue. We can't really call it a perception or kind of like something that we're all kind of amplified by the media. Annual reports are clearly stating that women are entering into tech roles at a staggeringly low numbers and such a high level. They're leaving after a number of years to pursue different careers. On the flip side of that, though, I strongly believe we will see a big shift with the younger generations as they start to reach working age. For example, my daughter is 7. She requested a microscope for Christmas. She's in 2nd grade, and they're already using them in her science class. I don't think I saw a microscope until I was like halfway through high school. So that's a big difference. Like, young girls are being exposed to all sorts of career possibilities. They're supported, they're educated, and they're going to be pursuing careers that weren't even possibilities 15, 20 years ago. So I think there are two issues. Like, we need to correct it today, but I think we're making great strides in correcting it for future generations.
Great, thanks.
I love your optimism. I wish I feel that way. I don't know. Maybe my lens is a little different. So there are some interesting numbers, right, that we keep seeing. For example, if you're looking at undergrad degree for computer science, looking way back before everyone was flooding to CS. Let's say back in 1980, the figure of the percentage of women having an undergrad degree in CS was about 35%. It's not a bad number, right? Looking 2 years ago, 2015, the number went down to 16%. And my question would be why? Like, I look back at my alma mater where I got my undergrad degree. I was, 1 in 7 women. Looking at how they're doing right now, they aren't doing much better. So to answer your question, I think there are multiple factors, right? One is, how can we get more young girls interested in a technical or in a science degree, so that it's not all jaded for, boys who like games, for example, right? But then also, more importantly, it's not just a pipeline problem. It's also the fact that, like what you were talking about, the culture, the workplace, right? Are we inclusive in our work environment so that, we can actually retain the very limited amount of women that are coming in? Or is it so bad that we are scaring them away? So, it's multi-factor.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Tamara. Thea, you were done, right? I don't want to jump in on you.
Yeah, I think she was.
Okay, great. Well, I think this issue, it's so popular right now for us to discuss gender inequality and diversity initiatives, but I think we get to look at it. I think it's a really deep cultural pattern, right? It's rooted in the makeup of all of us. I mean, if you look at historically, women have been marginalized, in most cultures. And so, it's the thoughts, the deeper thoughts, sometimes the unconscious cognitions, and we're all prone to it, even women. I think women are hardest on women, quite frankly. But it's a cultural piece that we have to shift, and I think that's not going to happen overnight. And I think that's why, even though there's a lot of talk going on, most women would say that they're not seeing the action being taken because it's still at a talk phase. But it was last week I was at a energy and utilities distribution conference, and I did a keynote. There were 15,000 people in the audience. And before I got up, the guy putting the mic on me, the AV guy, he goes, "Can I ask you a question?" And I said, "Well, sure." And he said, "Do you do a lot of these?" And he said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, do you think sometimes they just bring you in so that they make sure there's a woman on stage?"
Oh, man.
That's before I'm to get up and be super, inspiration. I'm thinking to myself, if this is going through this guy's mind, how many other people think that? And men don't have to deal with that. A guy getting mic'd up to go on stage, no one's thinking, gee, I wonder why they brought him in here to check the box. And I just think that it's this deeper seated thing that we have where we all know it's present, so now everybody's hyper concerned, and now the assumption is, well, maybe they're bringing some of us in to make sure that they're meeting their equality or diversity quotient, and that's sad as well, because we're still not addressing the issue of equality, which is we have intelligence and we are all created equally in that way, and we have gifts and talents that we bring to the table, but we have these eyes that with a limited vision, this myopic view that sees gender first, sees skin color first, sees religion first, versus seeing who we all truly are, which is beyond those illusions or those layers.
I absolutely agree. Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. I can't remember how many times I used to get told when I was in college that, oh, you must be here because, guess what, I'm not just a woman, I'm Asian woman, so, you wouldn't have been here if it wasn't because of the quota that, they're trying to increase diversity in campus. It's awful. It's absolutely awful. I'm like, wouldn't you even consider, perhaps I do have half a brain or maybe even more than what you do, right? Not just, like you say, the attributes of a human being.
But Tamara, I kind of want to circle back to what you mentioned about female colleagues, because I know when I worked for a software company, my greatest work foes were my female colleagues. Well, my male colleagues were actually very supportive of me in my role and then growing in the company. So I was curious what your experiences were in that context.
Yeah, I think, years ago, I've always been interested in, religious studies and cultural studies and, how when did we invent marriage beyond, joining nations and wealth. And so I had this odd brain that's been involved in this kind of research. And I remember a cultural anthropology class I took at Berkeley. And women are hard on women for this reason, is that there's a competition, right, ingrained cellularly into women to claim their territory, claim their, claim their offspring. And so women are really hard on other women for this almost DNA threat, right? So in these studies, until a woman reaches the age of premenopause, menopause, so say 50 and after, then this whole other drive comes in, which is building community, building collaboration. There is no threat anymore because you're not in competition with anyone. And it's a very interesting study when you look at ages and stages, and I think there's a lot of truth to these unconscious drives, these unconscious cognitions. And you do see women as they become more seasoned within their life, that they begin to reach out more, support more, uplift more. But you do see this terrible competition between women that often blocks them from being able to be elevated.
Do you think that primal quality is amplified just by the fewer women in these roles, so they have less competition, so they feel more need to stand out?
Yeah, or you know, it's interesting. Women are harder on women for everything. Like, women will judge another woman by her hair or what she wears. And, you know, and I'm not trying to gender stereotype, but I will say there are differences between men and women typically. So I'm not going to generalize across the entire population. But generally, most men don't really care what another guy is wearing. And the guy isn't going to judge the other guy by his shoes, or be threatened because the other guy is younger or more attractive than him. But women can be really, really harsh on one another for those really silly reasons. And a lot of times, like I said, these are not conscious. It's not like women go around and consciously want to size up other women. It's a very unconscious thing. Ask any guy, when a woman walks into a room, usually the other women are checking her out first.
Yeah, it's probably true. I think, and the whole thing of when the speaking part comes in as well. I've seen quite a few discussions in meetings where I've been when it's almost like sometimes the man has to kind of interpret what the woman's saying as well, which I've not seen a company that I'm employed by, but I've seen it in meetings that I've been at other companies when there still needs to be some kind of interpretation. Have you seen that at all?
Oh, you mean the man
Yeah, the man's thing. I didn't want to use the word. Yeah.
Is this man speak versus female?
Yeah, no, I've seen it, but I've also seen it where the woman has already offered that as a solution, and no one ever acknowledged it till some guy at the table offers the exact same solution. They're like, man, that's awesome. That's a great idea. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. You know what? It's not just in tech. It's everywhere. That's why I say it's a cultural thing. If you are a woman and you go to a driving range, right, because I like to play golf, and there are, you know, completely unsolicited golf advice comes at me from every angle from total strangers. But if you were a guy that went to the driving range, dudes aren't coming up to you to try to adjust your grip. So it's just bizarre, you know, that culturally, because I'm female with a golf club in my hand, I automatically need your help and want it.
Did you show them back how to do it properly?
I'm like, dude, Ben Hogan taught me, so back off, buddy. Your grip sucks. No.
And just to pick up on something we were talking about before the call started, CES this year, again, you know, appalling lack of women speakers. Do you think that conferences like that, I mean, what kind of impact does that have then in sort of setting perceptions of, you know, maybe younger women who've got, you know, some technical qualifications, deciding whether to work in an actual tech company, or people looking to maybe start a tech degree? Does that either consciously or subconsciously just contribute to putting women off? And if those conferences realize that they've got like an all-male lineup, you know, what do they do? What do they do about that? I mean, is it actually something that they need to specifically have a quota for? Because then you get into the cycle of having that question mark, then again of if there is a woman speaker, someone wondering if that's just to kind of tick a box. How do we get? I mean, ideally, it shouldn't even be a conscious thing. There should just be enough women there without having to consciously do a head count of how many male and women speakers there are. But until we get to that stage, do particularly conferences like CES need to really set the agenda and actually doing something positive about the imbalance that they've got?
Absolutely, they should. And the fact that, you know, not only this year they had, you know, all the 6 keynote speakers being all men. Last year, it was exactly the same. So, okay, you didn't learn one year, but you would have thought you would have learned better. the next year, right? And especially CES being a big, big tech show. It's not, a little one. You can't say you don't have resources to go look for people. And you know what? There are a lot of amazing, brilliant female executives out there, right? It's just a matter of, do you keep reaching back into your own same little black book that you've been using for years? Well, if you keep fishing from the same pond, that might be an issue, right? And it's not just the fact that they didn't have the speakers there. A lot of times people need those speaking opportunities so that others know them, right? And then it's just like a vicious cycle. You see someone on stage, you think of something, oh yeah, maybe I'll reach out for opportunities, right? And so it just goes to add that it's so much harder to get exposure, to get known, and also, the other thing that goes with it is, well, they're not good enough. Really? But you have some pretty awful people on stage as well, right? It's just bad excuse.
And how much is the onus on the actual companies at the conference? Because many of the companies at CES have got, senior women execs who are competent speakers. How much is the onus on them to actually say, we need to, get some of our women in front here, or is the onus really on the conference organizers?
Yeah, I would be curious to know their criteria, because what we're talking about, there weren't any female keynote speakers. Well, to be fair, they did have 300-odd other female speakers around the event, which is fantastic in its own way, but not having any women in that very prominent role on the big stage is disappointing. Their public response was even more disappointing. I think there's a lot of room for improvement because, as you stated, there were a lot of really cool brands that do have powerful women who are eloquent speakers who would have been amazing keynote speakers. So I think there's opportunity for them to step up definitely for next year.
The other thing to consider, too, with these big stages is a lot of people don't realize, behind the scenes what these are. A lot of these are pay-to-play stages, right? It's very expensive to pay for your speaking slot, and so these companies, they're paying a lot of money to have this spotlight, and so they put their executives on, and a lot of companies are mostly male are sitting around that executive table, except for, usually your token, your CMO, there's a lot of females in a CMO role because it's marketing, and marketing is, female friendlier. And you may have your general counsel be a female, but typically your CEO, your COO, your CIO, your CDO, all your other ones are males, and so they want, when a company pays that much money for a stage, they want to highlight themselves. And so that's why I think you see on stages like CES, you see the predominant male audience, because those are pay-to-play stages. They're not bringing speakers in and paying them to be there. These people are paying to have the stage.
I'll use another example too. This one is pretty, it's more recent. I'm not going to name names. Let's just say it's a pretty prominent fintech forum that just happened in France. It was another one of those, big backlash because they had over 200 speakers that were there, and the number of women speakers were very, very, very dismal. Let's just say. There were a total of 23 women speakers. And so people asked the same question, how come there weren't more women? And one of the responses was, well, they didn't apply. It's like, okay, come on, guys, we need to learn, right? There are a lot of women out there. Just ask one, and I would bet you she can probably refer another 5 or 6, and it just goes balloons up, right? And I attended another one similar to that. They had 14 startups on stage, it's all 14 guys. And no one, you can't look at me in the face and say, no, there are no female startup founders. There are. You just have to, work a little harder to find them.
I think that comes back to, we keep referring to this as kind of like a women's issue, but I think it's something that men and women need to tackle together. Perhaps more men could encourage their female colleagues to apply for speaking opportunities. Fathers to encourage their daughters to pursue tech roles. And, the data may never be 50-50 in the tech industry, and that's fine. but I think we can all acknowledge that we need to work together. We can only achieve these goals that we're all striving for if we do work together. So it's not just, women having to fight for women. It's men need to fight for women as well.
Yeah, actually, you raised a good point there. I saw an article, I don't remember where the research came from, but it showed that women, when applying for jobs, would look at job criteria and sometimes actually just be more honest about whether they met the criteria or not. And sometimes look at that and go, actually, no, I don't really meet that criteria. And they'd only want to put themselves forward for it if they were really confident they could do a good job. Whereas sometimes men would be like, I don't actually qualify for that criteria, but I'm going to give it a go anyway. And I'm not actually really capable of it, but I'm going to still give it a go and maybe blag my way through it. And that has an impact on people applying for jobs, and that sometimes you get a man and a woman, and the woman's actually more qualified for the job, but she maybe doesn't think she is, and so she doesn't apply, whereas the man just, with maybe some testosterone boosting him along, decides to go for it anyway and manages to get it just because he dived in. And just maybe the same applies to speaking. Actually, sometimes there are women who are perfectly capable of speaking, but maybe are just being hard on themselves, thinking they shouldn't do it, whereas there's some guy who just thinks they're going to be great. Actually, they're rubbish, but they just go for it anyway because they have that confidence. I mean, how much is that confidence piece, and maybe women being too hard on themselves and the men being not hard enough on themselves, factor into it?
I think it's, I think it's a great point. I think it's a amalgamation of all that, right? So I think that there's the truth to what you said about, I was just having a meeting last night in New York City with a colleague, and she was considering, there was a great promotion that she wanted to apply for, but it would be managing 100 people instead of managing 20. So she said, I'm going to pass it up because I've never managed 100. And so I about pushed her off her stool. I'm like, what are you talking about? So how do you get experience managing 100 people until you take the job managing 100 people? And I know as well as you do that if you can manage 20, you can manage 100, right? Because now you have even more resources to support you. So you better go for it and you better apply. But it's that encouraging one another, going, go for it, that I think women need that, right? Women crave community, and if they have that support and sponsorship from both men and women, I think that they will be encouraged to apply for those roles. Because you know as well as I do that a guy managing 20 people would have no hesitation applying for a management position of 100. It would be a no-brainer. So it's that you said, and then also with respect to a lack of female keynotes, it's, a lot of keynotes are derived not by application. I have never got a speaking gig by applying for it, ever. It's always by word of mouth, right? It's an invite. To some of these big stages, you are asked to come. So it's about really offering up the women that you know who can also be a good speaker, because it's by referral basis. So, Rachel, you were spot on. If it weren't for the incredible men in my life who are constantly mentioning, hey, why don't you ask Tamara? If it wasn't for that, I love the supportive men in my life as much as I love my supportive girlfriends and colleagues that are female in my life. It is a global thing. It's a community thing. It's an us thing. And it's a together we're better thing. And it shouldn't just be women, and it shouldn't just be men. It's collaborative, and it is best person for the job. And it is, let's have some diversity of thought, because we are smarter when we have diversity within a room, including a conference and keynotes. But it's that referral thing, and that's why there are hardly any females on boards. Why? You don't get board positions because you applied for them. You get the board positions because somebody who's on the board recommends you. And so men recommend men, and what we need is men helping, supporting, sponsoring, recommending women as well.
I completely
Can I
agree.
just say I love that? Yeah, that's awesome.
And I was curious to see, I kind of feel like with confidence, it's perhaps more personality versus a gender trait, because I know both men and women who are very ambitious and for sure have applied for roles perhaps above what their current position is, but like you said, you won't know if you can do it until you try. And if you have supportive peers encouraging you to do so, you're very likely to succeed. So I don't know if that's we can stereotype that to a gender, like all men will always, be ambitious in applying for speaking roles or promotions. But I think if you have a support system of men and women, you're unstoppable.
I love that.
Yeah.
Unstoppable.
Unstoppable. I like it. And, and the point about, it's not a women's issue, right? If we can actually do a better job, be more inclusive, and have both men and women on board, not only, we have a better solution. I think, Tamara, you wouldn't know this because you just came back from Davos. The World Economic Forum, they estimated that, the world in general as a whole, they can increase the global GDP by $5.3 trillion by 2025, only if we are willing to close the gender gap a little bit. Not saying, we'll close the complete gap, but just close a quarter of that. I mean, think about it, $5.3 trillion is a lot of money, right? And it's not just, women fighting for women, it's men fighting for women, it's, everyone fighting for everybody because it's not a gender issue. It's, and our entire economy as a whole benefits.
Amen to that. Yeah. See, this is why I should have been a witch, because I could just wiggle my nose and it would all be fixed.
It's not too late. You can still have time. Come on, we count on you.
You know what's interesting, you guys, is that I love what you and Rachel brought up, is the fact that, I do think this younger generation coming in is more bold and has a different kind of sass and pizzazz about them. You see, I don't know, I have a 14-year-old daughter, and I am amazed by what she believes she can do, and I think it's awesome. But in my own mind, I'm like, wow, at 14, I did not think that. And I do think the younger generation is coming in, and that's what younger generations are for, right? They're to disrupt us. They're to question our thinking. And I think that young women have some of the things deep inside that I know I had to acquire. It wasn't born in me.
I agree. I think we're definitely raising generations of fearless women and men. And I think as technology enabled, there's so much at their fingertips now that we didn't have in prior generations. And the old saying, the world is your oyster. I mean, it truly is. I think they can, whatever they set their sights on is attainable, not without hard work, of course, and maybe some sacrifice, but I think it really is kind of the equalizer in that almost anything is attainable.
This is all great stuff, guys. Just on the point about the making people aware of women who are out there on different topics. I remember last year, I think it was about May or so, I was seeing Melanie Ehrenkratz from, I think she was at Mike at the time. There was a list of 1,000 women in tech speakers. I think we'll tweet the link out just for people to find that. But that was quite a cool list. It was kind of crowdsourced. Loads of women contributed to kind of compiling that list just to make sure there was no more excuses about conference organizers saying they couldn't find any women in tech speakers. That's also why we at Analytica published a list just a month or so ago on the top women in tech, just to raise the profile of all the great stuff going online, looking at topics like fintech, where particularly some of the conferences have got a really bad imbalance. But that's also, the three of you together have got about 500,000 followers online, different social channels. I want to ask about the role that social media can play, and also the role that people like you can play, talking with other women in tech online, to help change the perception, to help raise the profile of great women in tech, either as speakers or as writers, or as just subject matter experts. Is that a really good way to kind of address the imbalance? If the conference organizers aren't going to do something about it, what can we do through social media to start to change those perceptions?
I think absolutely social media can help. I think it's important to not only be visible but to be accessible. I think that's what I do on a daily basis with my role in influencer marketing, is that I identify key thought leaders in the technology space, and I help them create amazing content and get their story out there. because you don't want to be put on a pedestal and revered. You want to, share your story, inspire others, and to do that, you need to get in front of them, in front of young girls, in front of women just entering the workforce. And of course, this goes for men as well. Women inspire women, but of course, as we talked earlier, men also inspire women. And hearing from successful people, regardless of gender, is very empowering and can inspire you to choose a career path that you might not have previously considered.
Yeah, it's one thing we left out of our list. I mean, the list we published just had women, obviously, in it, but there are actually a lot of men, some of them in senior roles, also talking about women in tech and promoting their female colleagues. So it's good to see that. I'm almost wondering whether we should almost put a list out of of actually men who are actually stepping up a bit and trying to do their bit. We left it out of the analysis, but it's certainly been a big part of the. So we left it out of the list, but it certainly has been a part of the analysis. It's just, I would say, there's not enough from what we can see. The women in tech topic as a whole is overwhelmingly a female topic. There are some men promoting their female colleagues, but at least from the analysis we see, there's not enough of it. Perhaps we can maybe do some more analysis on to see if it's changed in the last year, whether more men are specifically talking about some of these issues, because they certainly need to.
Yeah, I think there are.
Go ahead, Theo. I'll go after you.
Okay. Yeah, I think there are. And, I would say in my early days when I first started, playing in social media and trying to get some of the messages out, the people that helped me and guided me and coached me, they're all guys. And they were all very, very supportive. So there are a lot of them out there. And I think one of the very interesting roles that social media can play is we can leverage it as a platform to shine a spotlight on things that we care about, right? Care about raising the profile of some of the other female founders that otherwise don't really have a way to get their message out, or, use that as a way to get, more attention or call attention to the fact that, hey, this and this conference is in here, the organizer can do a little bit better, and here's, you spark a discussion. I think it has been a very amazing and interesting tool. And
I was going to say, with respect to social media, too, is that the one beauty of that is that it has created the ability, it's democratized across the entire population, the ability to get your voice out there and to create relationships. Because, in the end, what we're talking about here are relationships. And it always comes down to relationships. It's not who you know, right? It's who knows you. And so social media is an access point for anybody to be able to create relationships digitally through sharing their voice, through sharing other people. I think the people who do the best in social media are the ones who are uplifting others, who are promoting other people's messages, And so I think that, that gives all of us the ability to meet and get to know men and women on a digital platform that we would have never, ever met before and hear their messages. So I can think of no more powerful vehicle for freedom, for equality, for a better life, for anything than social media.
I agree. I know Tamara and I met many years ago on social, and we had phone conversations and many Twitter chats and emails prior to meeting in person. And yeah, I think relationship building is amazing thanks to social media. You connect with people that would never have crossed your path otherwise. And to that point, though, it's a great amplifier. It amplifies the good and the bad. And I think we need to put the responsibility on ourselves to, put out the positive messages and lift each other up, like Tamara said.
Yeah, and I think it's wrong for us to think that it's somehow the responsibility of a man or a woman to find people who are not putting themselves out there. I mean, if you're on the basketball court and you're wondering why no one's giving you the ball, well, get out there. Put yourself in the position where you should get the ball. I don't believe that this should be a discussion of trying to lift up and look under rocks to find people because we have to check boxes. I don't believe in that at all. To me, it's an admonition to women to get out there and be visible in any way, shape, form they want. And, if you're an artist, be visible on social media. If you're a technologist, be visible on social media. Tell us what you love about what you're doing, the research you're doing, why you're doing it. Be visible. It cannot be, it's got to be something that we all have a responsibility in, including the individual. And we can't abdicate our responsibility for visibility. You have to do that. If you want these roles, you want these positions, you want these invitations, you are responsible, as much as me, as much as Theo, as much as Rachel, to get yourself out there and be visible so that someone will pass you the ball. And it's not an entitlement thing. It's not, oh, I'm female, give me the role. No. Awesome, you're female. Yeah, high five. Okay, genetically you're a double X. Awesome. But what do you bring into the party? So every person, and this is how I've been raising our kids, is like, what are you bringing to the party? Why would anyone want to pair with you? If you've got relationship goals, what do you bring into the relationship? And for your relationship to work, what do you bring into work? So work on what you bring into the party, be visible, and opportunities will come. They're there. They really are. I am living into those opportunities. I know Rachel is living into those opportunities. I know Theo is living into those opportunities. And I'll just speak for myself, saying there's nothing special about me. I'm no more special than anyone else, but I do take the responsibility to show up. And women have to show up, and men have to show up to support those women who are taking the risk to show up.
Can we clap?
Yeah. Can I add to that, though? I agree. We need to show up and be there and, basically put ourselves out there and get our word out. But I think, in addition to that, we also need the support structure, right? So we think about in the workplace, for example, you try to do things, and you try to engage in conversations, you try to, attend events and stuff like that. But if the work policy is not flexible enough to support, for example, working mothers, then as much as they want to lean in and do more, they can't, right? So there's the caregiving duties. Do I have a nanny? Can I afford a nanny at home so I can be out there and do things? Or is there a, supportive leave policy, flexible arrangements so I can, be in my kids' school functions and yet, still be able to do more? Those are the things, that we live and breathe every day. I mean, I remember after I had my first child, I took a long sabbatical, and I eventually quit my job because I couldn't get that arrangement. I could not get that support. It was a role that I love. It was a company that I love, but I cannot, physically travel all the time and have a newborn. And so eventually I quit. And when I came back, tried to come back to work, it was very hard because companies don't have returnship programs, right? God forbid you took off when you were, having a little child at home. Oh my goodness. And then they start questioning, are you going to be a committed person, as committed as you were before you have a child? Or people question, well, but, are you going to be okay? And my response always is, look, just because I have a child doesn't mean that I lost my brain. I'm still pretty darn capable. And thank you for not asking my husband whether or not he could still be a committed worker ever since he is a father, right? Why don't people ask that? Why do people question newborn mothers and they don't question newborn fathers? They say, oh, yay, high five, you're a dad, wonderful, you are now mature. Here you go, here is, a promotion. You're a mom.
And a cigar, you get a cigar.
Right? So as much as women try to put themselves out there, I do empathize because I live and breathe that, is you still have, you still need the support structure for you to be successful.
What you're speaking of is back to that cultural debate, and that is, as a culture, we have to look at ourselves as a human family, and it's not a mom versus dad thing. It's a leave for parents. Like when you have small children, you're a parent, and so it's about supporting the culture of the family to be strong and healthy, because we know that healthy families also produce healthy workforce. And I don't think there's any father out there that doesn't want a healthy environment for their child as much as there's mothers that want healthy environments. So it's an us thing, and it's a leave thing for dads as much as moms. And I think that culturally we look at a pregnant woman and we think she's fragile. You know, it's got to be hard for anyone showing up in an executive role pregnant, because they have to be extra on to show that they are still capable and they're not handicapped by the pregnancy.
Speaking of, you know, they still call the maternity leave the disability. Speaking of fragile, but yeah, the disability leave.
We're actually getting some really great. Sorry, just I was wanting to make sure we give some time for some questions, and I'm actually getting quite a few good ones coming in. If it's okay, just to bring a few of these in. Just to follow up on the point that was just made about role models. One of the questions specifically is asking about recommendations for which influences you were thinking of women, or think about women in tech issues, that you would recommend daughters or nieces to follow. I'm thinking about I've got a daughter as well. She's 9. She's already on YouTube, and she's following people online. And it'd be great to start thinking about people that she can start looking at as good role models. And she's also interested in science. But any recommendations from you guys about particular good role models for people looking to start a career in tech that you might recommend for people with daughters or nieces?
Well, other than the ladies on this webinar, I'm a huge fan of Sandy Carter. I think she's doing great things for women in technology. For more of a science slant, I really love Joanne Manister and Vanessa Hill. They're doing great things for STEM and being very public about their support for women in science and technology.
Thanks.
So I'll jump in. I think Lego did a wonderful thing when they put the Women in NASA series out, because I got it for my kids. I had a daughter and a son, and it was a teachable moment, right, to show the little kids, hey, you can be anything you want as long as you work hard for it, right? Doesn't matter, if you're a girl or a guy. Because it was something that is important. I think parents themselves also need to act as a role model. When I was growing up, my mom always told me, you can be anything that you want as long as you work hard. There is no limit to it, and that is important. I think that was a study I put on Twitter a couple of days ago. That was fascinating. It was looking at pay gap, gender pay gap, and it was trying to correlate between if you were a working mother, right? If your mom was a working mother versus if your mom was, stay-at-home mom, and try to correlate the daughter's pay. And one of the results that they saw was, if you were raised by a stay-at-home mom, there is a likelihood that you will experience a greater pay gap than if you were raised by a working mother. And that was interesting. It's just a data point that I thought would throw out there.
And I have a couple of women, too, in addition to what my other two esteemed colleagues offered up. And because, obviously, I absolutely adore Sandy Carter as well. But, there's some other there's a lot of cool women out there. But Kimberly Bryant, she founded Black Girls Who Code. She's amazing. Tracy Chow, she is a founding member. She's a software engineer as well, but she's a founding member of Project Include. And she's a software engineer who worked with both Quora and Pinterest. But, she's an amazing woman in tech. Laura Gomez, she is the founding member of Project Include. Samantha John is the software engineer and co-founder of Hopscotch, and Hopscotch is an app that teaches kids how to code. So I just think that's so freaking awesome. Talk about, using your gifts and talents to create solutions to the problem, helping kids learn how to code. Then there's Allison Cappan, and she is the founder of Women Who Tech and RAD campaign, but I like to call it Badass campaign. But these are some movers and shakers out there, and I want to tell you, we all need to consider that some of the coolest people out there are not, and doing amazing things, are not necessarily the, making the biggest splash in popularity. Popularity isn't everything. It's really about, it doesn't take much to take a look at women who are making a difference in niche areas, doing super cool things. I cannot tell you how many female developers and engineers in the artificial intelligence space just rock my world. I mean, they're creating robots to be companions to the elderly, and they're doing amazing things, and they're so wicked smart, and they're out there. They're amazing role models out there, and there's a plethora for all of our daughters to learn from, and sons. My boys have been raised by a mother who travels and runs a company forever, so they're funny. They've grown up with a mom like that, so they just expect it. And even my son, because I'm divorced from his father. My son said to me, "Mom, do you think you could do this? Because you're the one that works, and you're the one with the money all the time." I was laughing because it's like the reversal in most households. Kids look to the dad for the money, and they look to the mom for that nurturing piece. But, my kids have had to grow up a different way, and I was a single parent for 8 years. So, a single mom's got to hustle to put food on the table, and, they grew up in a single mom household with a mom who hustled. So it's just different.
Cool. Thank you for those recommendations. I'm just aware we've got a lot of people from some marketing teams, some companies we work with, and people from other companies we don't work with. And one of the questions you had was, looking forward, what are the things that can be done to kind of change the status quo, and specifically, people who are working in marketing and comms roles at some of these larger tech brands, because we've got a few on listening in now. What are some tips that you could give to them, things that they can do as a brand to try either internally or externally to help change this paradigm?
I think it's about telling their story and being more vocal about what it's like to be a female at their company. I know there's some great campaigns out there. There's the Life at Cisco. A lot of these enterprise brands are making efforts to tell their story, to make it more welcoming for men and women across all of their divisions. So I think it's just about being public and making it accessible to see from the inside out about what it might be like. And I think that's very inspiring.
Yeah, I like what Rachel just said, because it's about telling your story versus pushing out complaint messages. No one responds to that. We have to think about, since you mentioned, Alstera, that these are marketing people, we have to apply the same marketing knowledge to this as we do a company branded message. And that is, you have to tell a compelling story. And a story is only compelling if there's an upside, if there's a hope woven within the story, if there's a solution. Complaining and just a negative spin has never drawn anyone toward, but rather pushed away. So to draw toward, it's got to be messages of truth, of a connected feeling, of that human family, of a call for support, a call for action in a really positive way that inspires people to want to be there and supportive versus pushing and separating me from thee.
Cool, thanks. Another question was about within the tech space, there are lots of different fields. Are there any particular markets or fields within tech that you think are particularly good in terms of what's going on with this male-female imbalance, or where you see women making maybe more strides in a particular area of tech than others?
I like AI. I think AI is very interesting and intriguing, because if you think about how our world is going to be, right, we are going to have AI embedded in our lives, right? And we already do in a lot of things that we touch. Think about from Amazon, right? That's a very easy example. So one of the concerns that a lot of people have is with artificial intelligence, we need to make sure that we don't end up coding bias, right, into the program. So the best way to do that is to make sure that the people that are coders, that are engineers, that are creating the solutions come from a very diverse background, and that way you can help to remove some of those blinders, if you will. So that was a TED Talk that was very interesting. I listened to a while ago. It was about a female engineer, and she went to school, and she was testing out this program that was playing peekaboo. And she's African American, and for some reason that program didn't work for her. And after a little while she realized, wait, because peekaboo, you were hiding behind something. Well, her complexion was much darker than if you were to have a Caucasian person in there, and so that's why it never worked. And so to complete her assignment, she actually had to borrow a friend of hers with lighter skin complexion to be able to finish it. So there is an example, right, of how we could actually create a more diverse solution that would be useful to a broader society rather than, on a segment.
And you said opportunity, or maybe I heard opportunity because that's all I like to hear about. But whenever there's a lack of something, to me, that's an indicator that it needs to be filled, so that equals opportunity in my eyes. And so there are so many tech verticals that have huge opportunity for women because there aren't enough women in those verticals. So one of them that I'm telling you, if I were young now and just entering school, I would be thinking about going into the energy sector. And here's why. You can't run IoT, you can't run AI, you can't run anything in our world without energy. Try flicking your light switch without energy. And energy is going to change, it's going to shift. I mean, if you look at smart grids, smart cities, autonomous vehicles, all these things have to be run with energy, and then there's alternative energy solutions and sources, and then there's the energy storage problem, and then there's the energy distribution with blockchain. Think about how many cool things are going on in the energy sector, and I will tell you what, you go into a 15,000 person room and you can't pick out any women. That to me spells opportunity. I'm like, woo, we should all be going into energy because there's a lot of opportunity to go up the ranks within that sector.
That's great. And I'm really sorry because we've actually got quite a lot of questions and we're not going to have time for them all. And our hour is nearly up. I feel like we could probably go on for another hour, but I think because we've got quite a few good questions, if it's all right, I'm going to maybe just email some of these questions through to you, the three of you. And if you do want to answer them by email afterwards, we can maybe just put them on the blog because some of these are good questions we're just unfortunately not going to have time for. But I just want to say thank you so much. It's been a really fascinating topic, and we've covered a whole lot of different points. I hope the talk has been good for the listeners as well. Do let us know what you think. We've heard a few people saying some nice things online already, which is lovely. But Tamara, Rachel, and Theo, thank you all very much. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have.
No, this was fantastic. Thank you for having me and us.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure and a lot of fun. You're right. Time flies. We're having a good time.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much for having us. We need to keep it up.
Great. Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.